We are in month 5 of this year's lettering style challenge. I chose to do a retro inspired script serif mashup, and I gave it a fun little kind of 90s magazine inspired treatment. Some people say it looks like ransom note lettering, but I wanted to make it more cute and fun and more like maybe a mix of magazine clipped letters, plus maybe even some stickers. And as usual, I want to give you a peek at the workbook before we get into how to draw some of the letters. So this is my final design for what I named my style for this month. Some details about the style itself, some of the features, and the video lesson which you are now watching. And then this is the full alphabet I came up with. Yours will probably be totally different if you work from scratch based on the single letter in the challenge worksheet that goes out in my newsletter each month. And then some of you like to get this and learn from mine. I just want you to be aware that this style looks really fun on its own. It does not have to have this treatment that I gave it. So you could do something totally different with those letters, and I have a page on that within the workbook. This is the style I chose to give it, but it's really versatile. You can do all different kinds of things. So here are your practice worksheets. I would suggest, just like I show you here, start with the line work in the middle, then practice getting your width and your lines and your curves and your weight and serifs right, and then work on adding color. So you can do that on top of mine here and then on your own on the second line for the entire alphabet. And then I have some doodles for you to trace. That's how I added some fun elements that are playful to my overall design. And then here's some ways you can customize it that are not the kind of magazine clipping look. So, and then also an easy way, and this is a really good practice for those of you working on developing your own styles, is to take one letter and see how many different ways you can change that letter while staying within your style basics. So all of these would fit within the same style, but I've changed slightly different things, and you can just come up with almost endless variations. Try coming up with maybe 5 to 10 for each letter. And then you have a ton of references, self-references to work with in your future lettering projects. All right, so now I'm gonna walk you through a sample of how to draw this lettering style in the manner that I chose to do it for this month. So here's a peek at when I name my style, I like to create a finished piece of art for it. So I did some simple like notebook details and then doodles. And then of course the cutout letters. And then I used some elements for the stamps from some of my Procreate brush stamp kits. So again, there is the basic alphabet, at least my uppercase. The lowercase is in the workbook as well. And here it is with the treatment. So all the letters are actually the same style. They just look playful and fun because of the treatment they're given, and they look more like some of my more signature mixed styles. So in your challenge PDF, if you are creating your style from scratch, you have this sample piece to work from. And that is what you're using as your inspiration to develop your entire alphabet. So here is how I would go about drawing this from scratch. So I've got a new layer here above my example, and I'm just gonna draw myself a few guidelines. So I'm gonna grab a blue color and just a simple monoline brush. So I'm just gonna pop in. So I'm putting a line down, holding my finger to make it a perfect line. And if you want, you can do a middle line. If you want to just eyeball it, that's fine too. As long as it's somewhere close to the middle, it's fine. So that is my guidelines. I'm gonna tap the end and reduce the opacity. And I'm gonna go ahead and rename that guidelines just to keep myself organized. And then I'm gonna add a new layer to start my lettering. So I'm gonna grab a dark color. And for the letter A, I would start by drawing a line here, like that. And then I know that I want it to curve, so I usually do something like, 2-finger tap to undo. I'm just gonna come in with a slight curve there. Again, it does not have to be perfect. This is just kind of our sketch for what we're gonna work from. And then Because this line comes this way, I know that I kind of want it to be kind of an extension there. So then I take that layer and reduce the opacity. And you can rename that sketch if you want, or you can just leave it if you don't want to rename it, because we will end up deleting it out. So then I come back in and I work on adding my width. So I will draw that same line and then draw another one next to it. And then my serif this time starts with a straight line. Go about there. Let's get in our curve first so we can judge our serif a little better. So then I'll come from an angle and kind of create a heavy bottomed script, which is kind of the retro style, something like that. We can refine it in our future sketches. If you want it to come a little farther down, maybe I want it to come, my original came a little more like that. Your sketches are usually going to be pretty messy. That's normal, that's totally fine. And so then I have my straight serif lines, and then all I do is kind of curve it and come over. Curve it, come down and meet it. Something like that. And then for this, I want it to be a flowing line. So I'm gonna start here and come over, and then just try to keep it about the same width. And so there's our sketch round 2. So you can turn off your first sketch. And if you want it to be maybe a little thinner, sometimes what I'll do is click my arrow tool and then click distort and maybe come over. You don't like to distort letters too much, but if you are working from scratch still and you're gonna redraw it, I find that it works just fine. So I'm gonna turn on snapping and magnetics so that it stays in the same, I don't want distort, I want freeform. So I'm gonna come over, see how it kind of snaps a little. If it's snapping too much, you can adjust the distance and velocity, or you can just turn it off and kind of keep it. So maybe I want it to be a little thinner there. And then again, I'll tap, reduce the opacity, and redraw again. And then this time, I'm gonna try to keep my lines a little smoother. So I'm gonna use my finger to make that perfect straight line. And I'm kind of just gonna go over my sketch, but being a little more precise. And I'll usually do this 3, maybe even 4 times for each letter. So that can take a little while once you get to it to do an entire alphabet. But your alphabet contains a lot of the same shapes. Next month style, which I already have done as well, is a really good example of how I took one shape and reused it throughout my entire alphabet. I'm gonna come upside down for that one to get a better angle. So you're just tracing your own work. And then visually trying to kind of eyeball and keep your serifs the same size. You can be super precise about it if you want. I tend to just eyeball it because I want it to look hand lettered and imperfect. So since I've got that done, now what I'll do is come in and color it. So I'll drag and drop my color. You can click continue filling and just color drop. And then I can turn off my sketch. I'm gonna keep it just in case I wanna come back to it. And then you can kind of see where you wanna change things. Like I want this bottom to be a lot heavier. And my original was a lot thicker, and I think I like that better still. So I'm gonna come back in and maybe thicken this up. So I just kind of go through this refining process until I'm happy with it. And sometimes that means a lot of sketches, especially when you're coming up with your first couple letters. As you get everything down, it's a little easier. because you're gonna repeat elements. So if I want that to be a little thicker, a lot of retro scripts are heavier at the bottom. So I kind of kept that in mind as I was working through creating this style. Okay. In real time, I would keep perfecting this until I'm super duper happy with it. One thing I might do as well is if I'm not happy with like my swash at the bottom of this, I will grab this selection tool on freehand and then grab my arrow tool, and I'm still on freeform, so I can kind of shift it into place and make it higher and then let it go and then come back in and refine those lines again so they're nice and smooth. And again, you can use your eraser to do that. Or you can even reduce the opacity of that layer and draw your letter yet again. Oops. So I want that to be a little thicker. All right, we could keep playing with that infinitely until we're happy with it, but that's pretty good. So I want to give you the basic idea so that we can get to the treatments as well. And then for the letter A, I ended up drawing it 2 different ways in the final. Let me see if I can show you that here. Let's see, I gotta go way back to all my lettering styles. Where are they? Oh, here. So in my final for the lowercase, I did 2 styles of the A. So that's called the double story A when it's kind of that old typewriter style, and that's a double story G. I decided to also do a more standard script A. I did not do a standard script G, although that would be really easy for you to add to yours. Let's say you were trying to work off this font and you wanted to create your own more standard G. So when I said that I repeat a lot of elements, so here's a good example of that. So let's take part of our A, select it, click copy and paste. So then I'll move that up here. Now I want to add the bottom of the G. So I could try taking part of my J, copy and pasting, and just bringing it right up here to be part of my G, and then merge those 2 layers down and then color it in. And that's what I mean by using the same elements. Like you can see my B is almost a flip D with some added detail. My M has part of my N in it. For example, the P and Q, I flipped my P, I changed the serif and added a. So when you repeat those elements like that, it's not cheating, it's keeping your lettering consistent and making this one style feel cohesive. So in a couple seconds, I have created a normal style G. So that's what I mean when I say that. All right, back to that. So now the lowercase letter A is pretty simple to draw. So what I like to do, I'm gonna come slightly above my midline here, make sure I'm on a new layer. I'm gonna draw kind of an oval shape, and then you can even click edit ellipse, and if I want the bottom to be a little thicker, like that, and then I have my oval off center and also heavier on the, or higher on the top so that my bottom is heavier. So this part is thicker than the top part. And then I'm just going to create kind of a, my pencil is all wonky, a shape that's like that. And then I've got my serif. So again, I'm just sketching, so it doesn't have to be perfect by any means. We can refine it. I think I'll start with this part and then come over like that. And then see how I had that a little open before? If I go to color fill that, it's gonna bleed in my page. So I need to make sure my shape is closed. All right, so that looks pretty rough, but as we color fill, it takes shape a little better. And then maybe I color fill it and notice this looks too far over. So again, I can take my selection tool, move it to where it looks a little more natural, and then reduce my opacity, and draw it one more time. So if you create an almost full circle, it creates the same ellipse you would need. So you don't have to complete the circle, and then you can click edit and shift it into place nicely. And then I think I want that to be just a little skinnier, not quite as wide of a serif. All right, so now we've got our two main letters down. So I'm gonna delete out my sketch areas. So let's just start with the lowercase because it's easy. You can use any colors you want. I am using a color palette that was from a recent class I taught online. So I'm gonna do that. So what I did there, sorry, I grabbed blue and then I just dragged and dropped to fill my letter. If you notice that it's not filling your letter enough, okay, so I've reduced my threshold. So if I go to color fill at that threshold, it leaves a lot of black. So all you need to do is drag and drop, hold, and then increase your threshold, see it moving across the top, high enough that you get a nice fill. Then I add a new layer below it. And another way to get the same color is to touch this little square here, and then you can grab a color. And then this one I want to look like a haphazard magazine cutout. So I'm just going to kind of create some blacky lines around it, making sure they're connected and just kind of at random. And then I can color fill that in. And because it's on its own layer, I can shift it around if I need to. And that is it for that one. So for the A, I could either come up here and grab my pink and color fill, or I could use this selection tool and grab it that way. So then for the letter A, I'm gonna do the capital letter A, we're gonna do more of a sticker style or a more precise magazine cutout, whichever you prefer. And for that, I just kind of get the width that I want and then trace my letter. It doesn't have to be perfect. Whoops, 2-finger tap to undo. I got a stray mark there. So I just kind of quickly go around tracing it. And then fill it in. And then when you fill it in, you can usually see where you have areas that don't look quite as thick or thin as others. So you can touch that up a little if you want to. We don't need our guidelines, so I'll turn that off. Now I want a little shadow so it looks like real paper lettering. So I'm gonna select those tools by swiping right on both, and so they're selected, and drag them to the top. While they're both still selected, I'm gonna take my arrow tool and shift it over a little. You can make it at an angle too if you want. And then I'm gonna take my base layer, duplicate it, and tap on the bottom layer. Then I'm gonna click Hue, Saturation, and Brightness and just make it really dark. And then I'm gonna grab my arrow tool, and you just want an ever so slight, like barely there kind of shadow. And I actually want it to be more of a really light medium gray. Looks a little more realistic. That's better. And then it gives it this subtle detail that it's dimensional, but you know, when you have one sheet of paper on top of another, it's just slight. So the slighter you keep it, the more realistic it will look. And then of course I added some hearts because I can't do anything without adding hearts, but that's how easy it is. So when you're doing your whole alphabet, I just kind of alternate that, and I'm thinking about balance as always. So, you know, that dark kind of gold color here, I'm thinking about how it balances out overall. And I don't want too many squares. You can see I added some circles, some rounded rectangles, but nothing too complicated. I kept it pretty simple. And then some look more like stickers, some look more like cutouts, and it just gives kind of a fun overall result. So that is it for this month, and I will see you for next month, which is a really fun take on a bubble letter style.